Hey guys, how's it going? My name is John Chambers, and I am an entrepreneur who has kind of gotten a little bit sick of the entrepreneurial world. I guess you could say I've been an entrepreneur for the past 10 years now, kind of, and would kind of more say that I was a wantrepreneur for most of that time, and that is no fun. Just being a wantrepreneur, wanting to start a business, but always running into roadblocks or always running into like these negative beliefs. And I wanted to make a channel that helps other entrepreneurs that are really trying to make a difference in the world. What I'm calling this is Entrepronomics. Basically, it's a combination of entrepreneurship and economics, and I'm going to be talking about the economic lessons that I have learned now that would have been useful for me starting as an entrepreneur. So this first one I want to talk about is what actually drives the market, okay? And the reason why I want to talk about this is, as an entrepreneur or as a wantrepreneur, then I was somebody who really believed that I could just sell anything. Like, I really believed that if I had enough gusto and just, posted to social media a lot, then I could sell anything, like really anything. Any product out there, I believed that I could sell. And if I didn't sell that, or if I couldn't, then that was somehow a problem with me. And personal identity issues aside, then that's not really accurate to say that you can sell anything. And it's a little bit like, it's kind of a little bit against the dreamer kind of grind set that people have, where you could do anything if you put your mind to it. But that's just not true. That's really just not true with the market. And so I wanted to kind of explain why that's not true, and why you really have to know the market before you go out there and start going ham on your new business idea. And so for this lesson, I want to talk about what actually drives the market. Okay, this isn't like hopes and dreams. This is what actually drives the market and what you should know before starting a business. So first of all, like my little Miro setup here, first of all, the thing that drives market is utility. Now what utility is it is basically the amount of happiness that a user gets for the price. This for the price paid. And this is a concept that kind of came about around the late 1700s, about the time that the American economy was just starting to be formed. And it basically is how people measured the, cost effectiveness of products, where a certain product would give you more happiness for less price, right? Like, let's say a toothbrush gives you one happiness point per the dollar that you spent on it. And then someone else came out with a better toothbrush that was the same price but gave you 2 points of happiness. And in that scenario, then obviously the second toothbrush would win out because it has 2 points of happiness for $1 spent, if that makes sense. But that's kind of what the economy was founded on, was the concept of utility, and it's what they used to that's what they started using to measure the effectiveness of products. Now the next thing I want to talk about is supply versus demand. Now remember, the utility thing was at the very start of the economy. Eventually it kind of morphed into like what it is today around that. But the reason why I have this question mark is, this is kind of like the big thing that people talk about, the supply and demand curve. You got to know your supply and demand, all that stuff. But is it really just supply and demand? Now, what I would argue is that supply and demand is a little bit, it's kind of generalizes things. What I have here is my own kind of version of supply and demand. It's not my own version. It's kind of a modified version of the things that I've gotten from my economics class. But it's basically what supply and demand is driven off of. So this is basically looking at cost versus demand, and the cost is the cost incurred by the company. So this green line is the demand line, and the price is always going to be on this demand line, the price of the product. And this line right here is the marginal cost. Now, marginal just means that it's the amount of cost that incurs with each new product. Now, as you can see, as we go along quantity, then the marginal cost increases, and that makes sense, you know, because you're producing more products, so the amount of cost you're paying, you know, as a result of one more product, it goes higher. And so that's kind of what this line is the cost line. This is what most people would call this the supply line, where it's like supply is going up and demand is going down, and it is. In fact, that's the law of supply and demand. But at its core, then the supply actually comes from the marginal cost incurred by the company that is supplying the product, or the companies that are supplying the product. So on our y-axis, we have dollars, which is like, it could be cost or price. But as you can see, just a basic rundown, let me zoom in a little bit. As you can see, then as the price, or as quantity goes up, then demand goes down. And that's just, again, the law of supply and demand. As there's less things, then the demand goes higher, because there's you know, just more demand because there's less things in the market. And as the quantity goes up, then the demand goes down. Now, as you can see here, then on this side of the curve, of the margin of the cost curve, now let me just hurry and briefly talk about this. This is the average total cost. So this is the actual cost of the company being in business. Notice how it's a little bit of a J shape. And the reason it is that way is because your first, when you're creating a product, in the very first couple, it's always going to incur some overhead costs. So that's basically what these are. It's just overhead costs. Obviously, your very first product that you produce is going to be your most expensive product. The most cost per product is going to incur right here, and then the total cost obviously goes up as you produce more products, because more products cost more to produce. So anyway, the area under this section of the line is basically profit. Let me just write that here. I forgot to write that down before. Let's hurry and write it here. So everything under this line is profit. I'm new to this. I apologize. Let's see. Oops. Okay. All right. We're just gonna do this like this. Okay. There we go. Okay. So everything under this line is profit for the company. Now, the thing is that, remember, utility is the amount of happiness for the price paid, and this utility is the consumer. Let me just write this down here. This is a consumer. So as a consumer, you want to have the most amount of happiness, right? You know, in whatever usefulness, it all kind of boils down to the same thing. The most amount of utility per dollar spent, right? So if the consumer wants the most amount of utility, then they want the price to go down, right? And that price going down causes the profits to go down for the company, right? So this price can move down. The consumers want the price to move down. Boop. Let's draw this with the red. The consumers want the price to move down, but the producers obviously want the price to move up, because the higher the price, the more profit, right? Whoops. Oh no. Okay. So it's kind of like, so here's kind of what's going on here. The price moves and shifts based on the consumers wanting the price to go down. Now, if the consumers had their way, price would be all the way at the bottom, right? Price would be clear down at the bottom, and, like, you know, they get it for free. Obviously, that doesn't work. As soon as the price goes lower than the cost, this is crazy, guys. I'm new to Miro, but you guys get it. As soon as the price goes below the cost, then the company starts losing money, right? And so the company doesn't want the price to go that low. So the company wants to push the price up, but the consumer wants to push the price down. So it's this pushing up and down of price that's actually the reason why the market moves up and down. Or, you know, very simplified version. You know, consumers want cheaper, so there's more, and then the producers increase price, and it's basically just a game of yo-yo, basically. Now, another thing to notice is that when the price is up, so if the price is really high with compared to the cost, then this is a lot of profit, and companies like to see this. Okay, so if companies see this in a market, so let's say we're in like the toothbrush market again. So if company A sees that company B is producing toothbrushes and selling them for this price, company A is like, man, let's stop producing silverware and start producing toothbrushes, because they're getting tons of profit in the toothbrush market. And so then we have an emerging market. That means that a whole bunch of people will flood this market and start producing toothbrushes because they see all the profit that's in there. Now, as the market starts to get saturated with toothbrushes, what happens? Well, then the people start competing on price. Then people say, oh, I produce toothbrushes also, but mine are 2 cents cheaper or 10 cents cheaper, so the price goes down. And in effect, the price goes down with the supply, right? That's where basically the supply curve comes from. That's why this becomes a supply curve, because the supply is going up because there are more people entering the market, and as those people enter the market, then consumers can get it for a cheaper price because they're starting to compete now, right? They're competing, and while they're competing, margins are shrinking, profits are shrinking, and pretty soon it almost hits equilibrium price, which is the perfect condition for a consumer, where they basically have the most amount of utility without spending, like the most amount of utility for their dollar, without obviously bankrupting the company. Once it goes into equilibrium, then the other toothbrush makers start saying, you know what, there's not any profit left in this market, so we're going to leave. So they all start leaving the market, and they start producing something else that has profit again. And that is what is called a declining market. And so as you can see, it's very much just like always fluctuating. The price is always moving up and down. The market's always getting saturated, and it's the saturation of the market that causes the price to go down and the margins to go down with it. And so it's those margins going up and down that cause more companies to enter the market or leave the market. Now you see this all the time, okay, on larger scales and smaller scales. AI, as an example, AI companies used to charge this much. Like, AI used to be super expensive. The market for AI was like not saturated at all, right? They could charge so much money, but then all these agencies or technology companies, they see these profits, and so then they jump in the market and say, I do AI, I have an AI tool, I do this AI thing. And then what happened? AI got cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and then pretty soon that market became saturated and people started leaving the market. Now when people leave the market, you actually can start increasing price again, and you get profit back in. But it's always fluctuating. It's always going up and down, and it's happening with every single market at the same time. Okay, this whole thing is happening all the time with every market at the same time. And so there's like, oh, this market's going up, oh, but this market's going down, this market's going up, and that market's going down. So there's always people entering and leaving, and the price is going up and down and up and down. And you can see that markets really just behave like the ocean, where it's just like waves of demand and supply going up and down. And so it does seem, and in fact it is impossible to predict the market. So anybody who's telling you they can predict the market is lying to you. It's impossible to predict it, but you can study it and make observations and see, well, this market has a lot of possibility. There's a lot of profit happening in this market, and it already happens. It's called the emerging markets. Now, obviously, there's the whole concept of a brand where somebody can come in and a brand can essentially set their price whatever they want, and other people coming into the market can't affect that price. And that's basically like, it's kind of a version of a monopoly, and that's a little bit different, where the brand basically offers some unique selling proposition, a USP, right? A unique thing about the brand. A lot of people call it a moat. There's something about the brand that makes customers willing to pay this price, even though all the competitors are like charging super cheap down here, right? There's just something about the brand, a secret sauce, a secret recipe that the brand has that customers are willing to pay for. And that's what you see, and that's really where brands came from. That's the whole reason why brands came about, is these people said, well, yeah, this person is selling a toothbrush, but my toothbrush has special bristles that are like trademarked, that only I have, and these bristles work better than any other bristles, and so then people are willing to pay the brand's price. And so that's where branding comes from. Okay, so yeah, the last thing I wanted to cover was, it's basically human nature that drives the market. It's the human idea of getting the most amount of benefit for the least amount of cost, right? That's the idea of utility. And it's also the idea of what is it? It just slipped my mind. Like instant gratification. It's also instant gratification. People want the benefit now, and so there's people that are willing to pay that, are willing to provide that benefit to people, and it's just, you know, there's a lot of, it's all human nature that drives the market. And so yes, you can't predict the market, but you can predict, as a general idea, human behavior, right? Because it's just how people are, and humans are just driven by instinct a lot of times, and so that's kind of what actually drives the market. And so to bring this home, if you want to sell a product, like I said, you can't just sell a product just because you really want to. You have these hopes and dreams. You really have to kind of understand what market you're going into, and if it's an emerging market, if there's enough price, or if there's enough profit in that market for you to really survive. So anyways, that was lesson 1, and it was kind of a really kind of zoomed in view of the actual forces that drive the markets out there. So I hope this was useful to you guys, and if you're on your entrepreneurial journey, then I hope that you are I hope that you can continue watching my videos. I want to make more stuff like this. I don't know if they'll all be like these lessons where I'm teaching stuff, but I just have kind of a passion for helping entrepreneurs. Yeah, I wanted to kind of clear the noise and give you a place where you could really understand what's going on. So anyway, I'm done yapping. That's all I have for this video. Do you guys like my dungeon setup here? I don't have a background or anything, so we're going for it. This is our very first video. So alright, thank you for watching.